Today we are going to consider 6 judicial nominees. Anthony John Stone, nominated to the Ninth Circuit. Judge Daniel Calabretta, nominated to the Eastern District of California. Matthew Garcia, nominated to the District of New Mexico. Judge Jeffrey Hopkins, nominated to the Southern District of Ohio. Lindsey Jenkins, nominated to the Northern District of Illinois. And Justice Adrian Nelson, nominated to the District of Oregon. I want to congratulate the nominees and their families and officially welcome them to the Senate Judiciary Committee. We have several colleagues who will be joining us today to introduce these nominees, and I will personally introduce 2 of the nominees. But before I do so, I want to briefly comment on the fact that we are proceeding today while the Senate is not in session. While it's rare for the committee to hold a nominations hearing when the Senate's not in session, it's happened before, more than once. In the 115th and 116th Congresses under Republican committee chair, the committee held 4 nominations hearings during Senate recesses, 1 in September 2017, 2 in October 2018, and of course the hearing for the Supreme Court nomination of then Judge Amy Coney Barrett weeks before the 2020 election. 3 of those hearings were held on days that the Senate was originally scheduled to be in session. Today is no different. My staff gave the ranking member staff advance notice as far back as August 17th that we were planning to hold this hearing today. Members have had ample time to prepare. In short, we undertake today's hearing squarely within the precedential bounds set by previous committee chairs. And I've said many times, we're not going to have one set of rules for Republicans and another for Democrats. Unlike the 3 hearings in the 115th Congress, however, today members will be permitted to ask questions of these nominees from a remote location, so everyone is at least able to participate. Now let me turn to introductions. Lindsey Jenkins. My great pleasure to introduce Lindsey Jenkins to be nominated to the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of my state of Illinois. Ms. Jenkins received her bachelor's degree from Miami University of Ohio, her JD summa cum laude from Cleveland Marshall College of Law. After clerking for Judge Solomon Oliver Jr. on the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Ohio and working in private practice for 2 years, Ms. Jenkins spent the majority of her legal career, 15 years, as Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. As an AUSA, Ms. Jenkins prosecuted a range of cases, from violations of drug and firearm laws to fraud to gang-related activity to civil rights violations to corruption. In addition to her caseload at the U.S. Attorney's Office, she became chief of the criminal division. In that role, she oversaw all criminal prosecutions in the Northern District, supervising nearly 150 assistant U.S. attorneys across 9 prosecution sections. In 2021, Ms. Jenkins returned to private practice, working primarily on internal investigations and white-collar cases. I look forward to hearing more about her courtroom experience, management credentials, and deep knowledge of the Northern District. I'd also like to take a moment and thank the Judicial Screening Committee that Senator Duckworth and I established to review candidates for the Northern District. Chaired by former Judge David Corr, the committee has done outstanding work, and they thought very highly of Ms. Jenkins. Senator Duckworth could not be here today to introduce Ms. Jenkins, but she submitted a statement for the record and strongly supports her. Also pleased to introduce Judge Daniel Calabretta, nominated to the Eastern District of California. Senators Feinstein and Padilla strongly support Judge Calabretta, whom they recommended, but unfortunately scheduling conflicts prevented them from introducing the nominee. They have submitted statements which will be made an official part of the record. Judge Calabretta currently serves as Superior Court Judge for the County of Sacramento, a position he's held since 2019 following his appointment by Governor Jerry Brown. He became presiding judge of the Juvenile Court in 2022. Before his appointment to the bench, Judge Calabretta spent 14 years in legal practice as an associate at Munger, Tolles, and Olson, as a Deputy Attorney General in the California Department of Justice, and as the Deputy Legal Affairs Secretary to Governor Brown. Judge Calabretta began his legal career by clerking for Judge Willie Fletcher on the Ninth Circuit and for Justice Stevens on the Supreme Court. If confirmed, Judge Calabretta will be the first openly gay judge to serve on the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of California. The Eastern District needs judges, as it has one of the highest average per judge workloads in the nation. And I hope the Senate's able to swiftly confirm Judge Calabretta along with other outstanding nominees. At this point, we're going to see if the technology is up to the challenge, and I'm going to turn it over to my friend and my colleague, the ranking member of the committee, Senator Grassley. Are you ready?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, for having this hearing. I very much appreciate the opportunity to hear why you scheduled it. I'll give a little bit of rebuttal on that. But before I do that, good morning and congratulations to all the nominees before us for being judges. Today, we have one nominee from Montana for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We also have 5 district nominees before the committee. Because of scheduling here in Iowa, I'll only be able to question the first panel today, but I will also submit questions for answer in writing to the nominees for the district courts. I've explained before that I think we should have held this hearing when we were in session. We held hearings during a recess in 2018, as the chairman has rightly stated, but we only did so because Democrats agreed to hold hearings on those specific dates after we had repeatedly postponed hearings as an accommodation to Democrats on this same committee. We've already had a problem with this administration's nominees refusing to answer questions, and I hope that that we I hope because of this process that we have remote questioning, that we that situation doesn't get even worse today. I welcome each of you and congratulations on your nomination. I yield.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. I understand that the decision to put this week on the schedule for session and then take it off has created some conflict and hardship for members, but you have been stalwart in your efforts to work with the committee and with me, and I appreciate it personally. And of course, I'll be yielding to you for your questioning of the first panel. But now we have further introductions, and we'll see if we can link up with first Senator John Tester of Montana, introducing Professor Johnstone. John, are you with us?
I am. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Good enough. Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley and the rest of the committee members for not only having this hearing, but for allowing me to introduce Anthony Johnstone, nominee to serve on the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. Currently, Judge Sidney Thomas sits in this seat, and he sat in this seat for 25 years, and he served with distinction. Filling his shoes will be no small feat, but I believe we have nominated the right person for the job. Anthony Johnstone hails from my home state of Montana, where he has served the people of our state to the highest possible standard. He has a distinguished career as a lawyer, as a public servant, that make him well qualified to serve in this role. Mr. Johnstone began his legal career by serving as a law clerk for Judge Thomas on the Ninth Circuit. He then went on to serve as a state solicitor and assistant attorney general at the Montana Department of Justice. And for over a decade, he has helped shape the next generation of Montana's legal minds at the University of Montana's Alexander Blewett III School of Law. In addition to his legal credentials, Mr. Johnstone has a proven track record of standing up for our Constitution and applying the law without any personal bias. I have complete confidence that he will be a fair and impartial judge. He also enjoys broad support from 2 former Montana Attorney Generals, Steve Bullock and Tim Fox, 6 former Montana Supreme Court justices, Indian country, including Montana tribes of Fort Belknap, Fort Peck, Rocky Boy, Blackfeet, the Little Shell, and countless lawyers from across Montana and from across the political spectrum. His experience in practice, government, and academics make him uniquely qualified for this role, and I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to pass this nomination out of committee so that we can confirm Mr. Johnstone to the Ninth Circuit bench. A functioning judiciary is essential to the rule of law and to the foundation of our democracy, and I urge this committee to advance his nomination without delay. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to voting for Mr. Johnstone's confirmation on the floor of the United States Senate. I yield.
Thanks, Senator Tester, for joining us this morning. Next, we have Senator Morton Heinrich from the state of New Mexico to introduce Mr. Garcia. Senator Heinrich, are you with us?
I sure am, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Great, thank you. Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, distinguished members of this committee, it's my honor today to introduce Matthew Garcia, President Biden's nominee to fill the vacant seat on the U.S. District Court of New Mexico. Mr. Garcia was born, raised, and built his legal career in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where this district court seat is based. An undergraduate and law school alum of the University of New Mexico, Mr. Garcia has cultivated a deep connection with the land of enchantment and genuinely cares for his fellow New Mexicans. I am proud to join my colleague, Senator Lujan, in strongly recommending Mr. Garcia for this judicial nomination. Mr. Garcia graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's in economics from the University of New Mexico. He then conducted research at the Helsinki School of Economics in Finland while on a Fulbright scholarship. And he received his master's in public policy from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Mr. Garcia then returned home to obtain his Juris Doctorate from the University of New Mexico School of Law. After law school, Mr. Garcia built his legal practice as a civil litigator, representing individuals in federal and state courts throughout the state of New Mexico. Mr. Garcia also has significant appellant experience in both state and federal courts. He has also served as an adjunct professor at the University of New Mexico Law School and as a member of the volunteer attorney pool for both the state and federal trial courts. Mr. Garcia left private practice for public service when he joined the office of New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham as general counsel from 2019 to 2020 and as chief of staff from 2020 to 2022. Mr. Garcia's service within the New Mexico legal community has led to his appointment on a number of important judicial committees and positions of authority. The United States District Court has appointed and twice reappointed Mr. Garcia to New Mexico's Magistrate Judge Selection Panel. He is a member of the New Mexico Disciplinary Board Hearing Committee, where he assists in addressing allegations of misconduct and ethical violations by members of the New Mexico State Bar. Mr. Garcia has also been appointed to a number of panels of the Supreme Court of the state of New Mexico. Mr. Garcia's reputation within the legal community and the New Mexico community at large is very strong. He is well regarded for the respect that he shows to the rule of law, the practice of law, and the role of our judicial branch in resolving conflicts within the parameters of the law. I am confident that Mr. Garcia will continue a proud legacy of fair and committed federal judges in New Mexico. The broad bipartisan letters this committee has received in support of Mr. Garcia's nomination share this same confidence. And I would encourage all of the members of this committee to support Mr. Garcia's confirmation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. And now we're joined, I hope, by Senator Ben Ray Lujan of the state of New Mexico. Senator Lujan.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman. It's an honor to be with you and members of the Judiciary Committee. I hope this is coming across.
Yes, it is, loud and clear.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you to you, to our ranking member, Mr. Grassley, and to all of the members of the Judiciary Committee for convening this hearing on the nomination of incredible nominees, but for us here in New Mexico, Matthew Garcia for a seat on the United States District Court for the District of New Mexico. I join Senator Morton Heinrich in offering respectful requests, and hope that we can earn the support and Mr. Garcia can earn the support of every member on the committee. I'm confident Mr. Garcia will serve New Mexico admirably on the district court, not only because of his education and professional experience, but he's deeply rooted in service. He's a man of outstanding character. Now, Mr. Garcia's education was shared by Senator Heinrich. I don't want to have to repeat that, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garcia started his career in the private sector, gaining experience on a broad range of issues, including multi-state antitrust actions, personal injury matters and related torts. In 2019, Matthew Garcia began serving as general counsel to our governor in New Mexico and later as her chief of staff. Now, I'll say this, Mr. Garcia has a proven track record of standing up for people here in New Mexico and a life of service to back it up. He's brilliant, he's humble, he's committed. He has all the makings of an excellent judge. And I have no doubt that he'll continue representing the best of our state that has to offer while seated on the United States District Court for the District of New Mexico. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time, and to members of the committee, and for inviting me to be here today.
Thanks, Senator Lujan. We appreciate your being here with us. Now we recognize from the home state of the Cleveland Guardians baseball team, the state of Ohio, Senator Sherrod Brown, to introduce Judge Hopkins. Senator Brown?
Thank you, Senator Durbin, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate I go back 6 years to when I had the misfortune of, I guess you shouldn't talk about things like this in the Judiciary Committee. I had a fairly friendly bet with the chair of this committee on the World Series, and people in America realized the Cleveland team hadn't won in 7 years, and the Cubs had not won a World Series since, I think, President Benjamin Harrison, something like that. But anyway, so I'll get back to something more serious. I see Senator Wyden, my friend here, who I think is up next. I'm smiling, or at least humoring me. Thank you. It's an honor to introduce the Honorable Jeffrey Hopkins. Is a highly, highly qualified nominee to serve as a federal district court judge in the Southern District of Ohio. The Southern District essentially is Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, and Appalachia, part of the state. Judge Hopkins' career is marked by the legal acumen and the commitment to community that we expect to see from nominees in the federal bench. It's why Senator Portman, my Republican colleague from Cincinnati, who lives in the Southern District, I live in the Northern District. It's why Senator Portman and I both recommended Judge Hopkins to President Biden to serve our state. When confirmed, Judge Hopkins will be the first African-American federal district judge ever appointed in Cincinnati. A reminder of this administration's commitment to diversity and inclusion and legal excellence. Judge Hopkins' legal career began as a clerk for Judge Alan Norris on the Sixth Circuit. I served in the state legislature with Republican Alan Norris. He was in Republican leadership at that time in the legislature. Judge Hopkins went on to work in private practice at Squire, Sanders, and Dempsey, then served in U.S. Attorney's Office in Columbus, where he was promoted to the chief of the civil division. Since 1996, Judge Hopkins has served as a federal bankruptcy court judge in the Southern District, has been the chief judge since, I believe, about 8 years, since 2014. Chief Justice Roberts appointed Judge Hopkins to both the Judicial Conference of the U.S. Advisory Committee on Bankruptcy Rules and the Judicial Conference Judicial Branch Committee, a testament to Judge Hopkins and his integrity and commitment and competence. His breadth of experience will serve him well as a district court judge. Yet his service, and one of the things I like, and I know Senator Klobuchar particularly, I see her on the screen, particularly appreciates this, his service is not limited to the law. As a volunteer at the Ohio Law and Leadership Institute, which educates and prepares students from underserved communities about the law and legal careers, Judge Hopkins understands the rights and responsibilities that are part of meaningful, active citizenship, and is committed to our basic democratic values in the next generation of leaders. In 2008, the Supreme Court started the Institute. Its growth and success would not have been possible without the support of Ohio's law schools and volunteers like Judge Hopkins. He also served as president of the board of the Cincinnati Museum Center, steering the city's institutions to a more successful, viable future. Judge Hopkins' life is an American story. His family, as part of the Great Migration, moved from Georgia to Ohio, settling in Canton, Ohio, in Northeast Ohio. His parents moved north for greater security and opportunity for their family. His achievements remind us of the power and the vibrancy of the American dream. Judge Hopkins' father, Eddie Hopkins Jr., supported his family as a union auto worker at Ford's Walton Hills stamping plant, a member of local union, UAW Local 420, and Judge Hopkins remembers that. We are joined by Eddie, Judge Hopkins' sisters, Cynthia Hopkins and Patricia Hopkins, and his wife, Michelle. I appreciate their being in attendance. His daughter, Haley, and his son, Jeffrey Arthur, are unable to be here in person with him today. I know they're watching. I know they're there with their father in spirit. I urge my colleagues, Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this nomination, urge the Senate to confirm him quickly. really want to get this one done by the end of the year so he can get to work serving the people of Ohio in this new capacity to continue his public service in a new way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Brown. Let me also note that your Republican colleague from Ohio, Senator Rob Portman, though unable to join us this morning, supports Judge Hopkins' nomination and is submitting a statement, official statement of support for the record. Finally, we have Senator Wyden of Oregon joining us to introduce Justice Nelson. His colleague, Senator Jeff Merkley, also supports the nomination and will be submitting a statement for the record. But at this point, I want to recognize our colleague and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Ron Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I heard you and Senator Brown doing a little sparring over Major League Baseball. I think you learn in the Senate to steer clear of such debates. I just want to note that Senator Durbin has done invaluable work for this country's children who've long been targeted by big tobacco. Senator Durbin has led that fight, and Senator Brown, of course, is the champion for working families on the Senate Finance Committee. So two good friends, and put it down in the record that I've carefully steered away from the debate about Major League Baseball teams at this morning's session. I'm in Southeast Portland at my home, and I'm pleased to be able to introduce a very good friend and neighbor, Justice Adrian Nelson, nominee for our U.S. District Court. Now, I've been part of a number of these judicial selection processes. You look for candidates with a deep understanding of the law, and you want to make sure that they've got a commitment to impartiality and a long record of community service. Having known Justice Nelson for years, I can tell the committee, and I base it on those years of friendship, that nobody fits the bill better than she does. She's highly accomplished and a decorated lawyer. She served on the Oregon Supreme Court since 2018. She is the first Black justice on the Oregon Supreme Court or on any appellate court in my home state. For more than a decade, she also served as a judge on the Multnomah County Circuit Court. So she has experience in private practice, she has experience as a public defender, and she has worked as a mediator. Every time I think about those mediator skills, we can use some of those in the United States Congress as well. And I see Senator Klobuchar smiling because she's doing a lot of that mediating work day in and day out very well. The work ethic, the integrity, and the legal acumen Justice Nelson has displayed throughout her career are just a few of the reasons why leaders from across my state have voiced opposition for her nomination. We're talking about justices on the state Supreme Court. It includes nonprofit and business leaders. It includes law enforcement officials from urban and rural communities, including district attorneys, the sheriff of our most populous county, a former U.S. attorney who served under Democratic and Republican administrations. These letters of support describe Justice Nelson as a hardworking individual, a person of humility, a jurist committed to fairness and justice for all. So there is no question, in our view, of her top-notch qualifications. She will make an excellent federal judge. I urge all on the committee to support her nomination. I'm happy to speak further to any member who is working on these nominations, because I think you'll find her to be an outstanding candidate. Senator Merkley and I, as is so often the case, are joined together in supporting Justice Nelson, wishing her congratulations. Mr. Chairman and Senator Grassley, I believe we may have lost you briefly. Thank you both for the opportunity to introduce her this morning, and we look forward to working with the committee in advancing this very, very important nomination.
Thanks for joining us, Senator Wyden. And of course, your colleague, Senator Jeff Merkley's statement in support of the nomination will be submitted for the record as well. Now let me address the assembled group here. We have two panels. The first panel will be for the circuit nominee, and then the second panel for the district court nominees. And so I, at this point, invite Professor John Stone to come forward. Raise your right hand. Do you affirm or swear that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you, Professor. And of course, answering in the affirmative, you now have permission to proceed. And you can take 5 minutes or even a few more if you wish to make your introduction.
Thank you, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee for convening this hearing and considering my nomination. I thank the President for this honor. It is humbling beyond words. Thanks to Senator Tester for his generous introduction. I also want to thank Senator Daines for taking time to meet with me and discuss my nomination. You know, like Senator Tester, my dad's family farmed Montana's Golden Triangle. Like Senator Daines, my mom's family started and ran a business in Bozeman, so I appreciate our shared Montana heritage. My parents are here today. I am grateful to them for their constant encouragement and support. Thank you to my daughters and son for missing school, sports, and a couple of shifts at the ice cream parlor to come be here with their dad. Thanks to my best friend who just finished running a marathon and hopped on a transcontinental flight to be here with me today. Thanks to my brother at home and extended family and so many good friends in Montana and around the country for supporting me through this process. And most of all, thanks to my wife for her strength, her partnership, and her love. I also want to acknowledge my late brother and mother whose memories sustain me. Finally, I want to thank my colleagues for a career working together in service in the courtroom, in the classroom, all the way back to my mentor, Judge Sidney Thomas. And of course, thank you to my students, some of whom may be watching this hearing today. It is they who give me confidence in the continuation of our Constitution's project of a more perfect union. I look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you, Professor. And let me just say that you have considerable experience, appellate litigator and Montana State Solicitor. Well, what does the State Solicitor do in this state of Montana?
Senator, the State Solicitor represents the people of Montana in a wide range of matters, both prosecuting on behalf of the state civil cases and defending constitutional challenges. It is an office that I took as a civil servant and one in which I was proud to stand up for the people of Montana, setting aside all political and personal beliefs.
The position you seek is an appellate judge, and you've handled 29 cases on appeal, including 19 as the sole or chief counsel or counsel of record. Can you tell me if you understand the difference between being an advocate in a courtroom and being a judge?
Yeah, well, Senator, there's some similarity in that just like my job with the state, if I were so fortunate to be confirmed as a judge, it would be my duty to set aside all personal and political views. But unlike a lawyer as an advocate, and this is something I'm stealing from one of my students, a judge's client is the law. And so my job, if I were to be confirmed, would be to reach the correct result under controlling precedent, under the laws that Congress enacts, and under the Constitution to which I've sworn an oath.
We've received a lot of letters of support for your nomination from a lot of sources, from the multiple tribes in Montana, including the Chippewa Cree tribe, letters from 6 retired justices of the Montana Supreme Court, including one who was initially appointed to that court by a Republican governor. And the committee received a letter from a Republican-appointed former Montana state solicitor who wrote, and I quote, "Review cases dispassionately and without political bias, and you would decide them based on the law and the facts." So tell me, in a state which has its own rough and tumble politics, how you have bipartisan support.
Well, Chair Durbin, I'm particularly honored, I should say, by the support of our tribes in the state. One of my great privileges as a teacher is to incorporate federal Indian law in all of the work that I do, and it is so important that we honor tribe sovereignty and the rights of Indigenous Americans. With respect to my support across the spectrum, I'm just grateful. I think I hope it is a testament to the fact that when I did my job as a solicitor, when I do my job as a professor in the classroom, I leave my political personal views aside. My job is a matter of serving the public, whether in the courtroom, in the classroom, and explaining, supporting, and arguing the law as best I can.
Thank you. I'm going to turn over the microphone to Senator Grassley if he's still in the queue. I hope you are, Chuck. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much, Chairman. And congratulations to Professor Johnstone. I'm going to ask you some questions to start out with about the Second Amendment. But before I do that, let me lead in with this. In an interview with a newspaper, you said that Young versus Hawaii was, quote, decided on narrow grounds, end of quote. You also reportedly said that, quote, the Ninth Circuit ruled consistently with previous Supreme Court decisions, end of quote. The Ninth Circuit had already held that there was no constitutional right to concealed carry of firearms. Young said there was no constitutional right to open carry. Judge O'Scanlan explained the Ninth Circuit said in Young that, quote, public carry falls entirely outside the scope of the Second Amendment. Even the state of New York conceded that it wouldn't defend that position in a recent Second Amendment case before the Supreme Court. This seems like a sweeping decision, not a narrow one. So 3 questions along that line. First, I'd like to have you explain why you think Young saying that the right to bear arms isn't a right protected by the Constitution is a quote unquote narrow decision.
Thank you, Ranking Member Grassley. If I recall that interview correctly, I was asked to explain whether it would have impact on the state of Montana, and I think it was in that context I'd said that as I understood the case as it stood, that it would not have an impact on the state of Montana given its laws and the laws that were issued in Young. I'm sorry, I don't recall much about the case beyond that.
Okay. My second question, could you please explain why you thought that this was consistent with the Supreme Court decision in Heller, which obviously held that the Second Amendment, quote, conferred an individual right to keep and bear arms, end of quote?
Well, Ranking Member Grassley, I actually start my constitutional law class. The very first case I teach is Heller because I view it as a textbook case in constitutional argumentation. And of course, as a judge, I would be bound by Heller, McDonald, Brune, and all other cases interpreting the Second Amendment.
I think you've just answered my third question, but let me ask it anyway. Is this the approach that you plan to take when interpreting precedent if you are confirmed?
Senator, as a circuit judge, if I were fortunate to be confirmed, I have no choice but to be bound by precedent, and that is how I would approach the job. I would be bound by circuit precedent, but I would also be bound by Supreme Court precedent. And if there were a conflict, an irreconcilable conflict, or an en banc process on the circuit, that would be the only way precedent could change, if there was intervening Supreme Court precedent. And I would be bound to follow that, and I would faithfully do so.
Okay. And my last series of questions would be regard to the Supreme Court and federal courts and the whole issue of politics of the court, or whether it's politicized. After the Supreme Court case summarily held that Montana's campaign finance law violated the First Amendment under Citizens United, you said that the court, quote, gave Montana the back of its hand. I understand it's probably frustrating to lose. Do you think that particular language that you use is an appropriate way to talk about a court decision?
Senator, if I were to be confirmed as a judge, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on particular decisions. I believe, again, those comments were trying to place in context for the public in an explanation the fact that it was quite rare for the Supreme Court to invalidate a state law without providing the state a hearing. And I think it was in that context, not about the reasoning of the case itself, that I made those remarks.
Do you have a particular, I thought that was going to be my last question. Do you have a particular Supreme Court justice that you think has a judicial philosophy similar to your own?
Well, Senator, Ranking Member Grassley, my judicial philosophy starts with the oath to decide cases impartially and faithfully. Impartially, as I've said, means that I would set aside all personal political beliefs. Faithfully means that I would apply the law as written, as enacted by Congress in the text of the Constitution and according to all controlling precedent. You'd asked about Supreme Court justices. That's one of the great pleasures of teaching and working with the work of our Supreme Court. I am impressed, as I said, I start with Heller. I think Justice Scalia was a wonderful writer, a clear writer. I'm Justice Kagan in my legislation class. I'm impressed by her reference to the way she weaves in Dr. Seuss and Shakespeare into the same footnote. Justice Gorsuch, as a Westerner on the court, Justice O'Connor, I think, is also someone who I've had the pleasure to meet. I have my own judicial philosophy, but I am impressed by the service of those justices and all of our justices, and would be honored to be able to serve in the Article III branch under them.
Mr. Chairman, could I have 30 more seconds?
Certainly.
I don't want you to comment on the leak that happened in the draft of the Supreme Court opinion on Dobbs versus Mississippi, but this is probably an obvious answer to this question. But do you plan to release drafts of your judicial opinions for public comment?
Ranking Member Grassley, that was a serious breach of trust. As a clerk on the Ninth Circuit, we were instructed and understood our duties to our judge, our chambers, our court, and the public. And it is entirely inappropriate to leak draft decisions in such a way.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Professor Johnstone.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. As you noted at the opening, you have a schedule that may preclude you from participating with the second panel by Zoom. But for the record, for you and for all of the members of the committee, the record is going to be open for written questions until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, October 19th. And we hope all nominees have sent those questions will respond promptly. But if you have any follow-up questions, that will be your opportunity. So thank you again, Senator Grassley. The next member of the committee, we understand, is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of the state of Rhode Island. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Have we got the comms right? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. I wanted to take the opportunity of having Professor Johnstone here to reflect a little bit on the Bullock case, in which I wrote an amicus brief aligned with the attorney generals from Montana, and the state of unlimited money in politics that we have to be dealing with. As the committee will recall, the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, by a vast majority of 8-1, determined that unlimited anonymous money in politics would be corrupting. And that is no casual finding. We as Americans take our manner of governance as a point of pride, and anything that would corrupt it is obviously a very serious matter, particularly when across appointments of both parties, you have an 8-1 determination by the Supreme Court that this type of political behavior would in fact corrupt. And that is why the fact finding of the Supreme Court in Citizens United was so important to that decision. They found as a fact that this funding, the unlimited political spending they were unleashing would actually be transparent. So there was no corruption issue to have to address, which raises all sorts of interesting questions because events have conspicuously and irrebuttably proven that they were dead wrong about that. We generally know that appellate courts aren't supposed to do fact-finding in the first place. So when they go gallivanting off into fact-finding, it raises some very interesting separation of powers questions. But when they go gallivanting off into fact-finding that is demonstrably false, it raises a whole new and complicated set of issues about what to do. What deference is the decision owed? Were the fact-finding done at a lower level, it would be overturned as clear, plain error. But from the top, what do you do about it? It raises some very interesting questions. And the reason I mention all this is because it was in the Bullock case out of Montana that I raised these questions initially with the court. And my partner in that was John McCain. So the brief was bipartisan. And we pointed out to the court that they were factually wrong, that events had shown that this flood of political spending the court had unleashed was neither independent nor transparent. And of course, events since then have only proved that case even more. John and I then did another brief together in the gerrymandering case, and both met with equal failure. The court was unwilling to take up the question. They ruled summarily and refused to take up the cases. I came back yet another time in the Liu case, where even more evidence had piled up that they'd been absolutely dead wrong about this question of transparency. So the Bullock case gave them a chance to correct their fact-finding error. And then the Liu case gave them a second chance to correct their fact-finding error. And they've conspicuously refused to correct their fact-finding error. The only time they've revisited this was in the Americans for Prosperity Foundation case, where they created a new constitutional right to dark money. And they did so in a case involving Americans for Prosperity Foundation, which is the corporate twin to Americans for Prosperity, which is a political dark money battleship originally propped up by the Koch brothers and their whole political operation. And of course, the decision was partisan 6-3. And all along the way and all through all these decisions, we have seen the court coached and encouraged by amicus briefs filed by, guess what, dark money groups. So it raises some very interesting questions. One is what deference is owed to decisions that stand on clear, plain error. But the other is what would motivate a court not to correct its error? And those are the questions that those of us who have grave questions about the integrity of the court right now are having to grapple with. Why on earth, for more than a decade, would the court refuse to correct an error as obvious as all this unlimited spending was going to be transparent? So I'll leave it at that because my time has expired, but I couldn't welcome Professor Johnstone more heartily to the committee and look forward to supporting his nomination.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. I believe Senator Klobuchar is waiting.
I am.
Take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for doing this hearing. And I am so excited to see Anthony Johnstone in front of us today. I want to say a special hello to his parents, who I know from some time they spent in Minnesota. And I think I met Anthony at a younger age than any of you met him. And I want to also note that he attended the University of Chicago Law School, where I also graduated from. And I want to note that the committee received a letter in support of your nomination, Mr. Johnstone, from 62 of your classmates from the University of Chicago Law School. And as we all know, University of Chicago is known to have a diverse student body with a range of backgrounds, certainly a range of legal philosophies and political views. including many conservatives and people who work in the private sector. And all of these classmates were united in your nomination and in their praise of your, quote, intellect, judgment, and temperament. In your view, how have you earned the support from people across the political spectrum throughout your career?
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, and it is good to see you again. You've served as an inspiration for my own public service. I'd like to think that as I'd approached my classmates from the beginning, one of the things that called me to this profession was an interest in engaging in good faith with people of differing views, of listening, of understanding, of being open to persuasion, and being able to try to develop those skills of working with people from various backgrounds and experiences to do some good in the world.
Very good. And I also will note that the committee received a letter of support for your nomination from 6 retired Montana Supreme Court justices, including justices who were appointed by governors of both parties. They described you as having unimpeachable character and said you are, quote, one of the best legal minds and the most respected legal scholars in the state of Montana, something noted by Senator Tester as well. Could you talk about, with that kind of support, how you ensure that you impartially review the law and the facts when you evaluate a case? You must have thought about that a lot in your career, and talk about how you would do that as a judge.
Thank you, Senator. Any lawyer would be heartened by the support of judges that they've appeared before, and so that's a great honor, especially so that in Montana our judges are elected by my friends and neighbors. I think that my work for the state in front of the Supreme Court and in other courts over 2 decades has been marked by careful attention to the record, making the best arguments under existing precedent as I could, and engaging the other side respectfully and trying to figure out where we agree and disagree. And I hope the courts that I've been fortunate to appear in front of have appreciated that.
You also are going to be filling the seat, as was noted by Senator Durbin and Senator Tester, for Judge Thomas, someone that you clerked for. Could you talk about what that means for you personally, what your relationship has been with him?
Senator Klobuchar, where to start? It was my first opportunity out of law school to come back to Montana and work with Judge Thomas. He would later become Chief Judge Thomas. He immediately impresses anyone who knows him as a deeply kind, caring man, someone for whom public service is the highest value, who has an incredible work ethic, someone who has listened and viewed his job, as I would view mine if I were fortunate to be confirmed, to be really a servant of one's colleagues on the court, of the district court, of the litigants, first among all, and of the public beyond in furthering the rule of law. And I can think of no better role model than the model that Judge Thomas has set in his years on the court.
Very good. One last question. From 2004 to 2008, you served as an Assistant Attorney General in Montana Department of Justice. Before that, then you went on to serve as State Solicitor General. You've handled dozens of appellate cases. You've argued 7 cases on appeal, including 3 before the Ninth Circuit. And what have you learned as an appellate practitioner, and how is that going to help serve you? You must have seen the good, the bad, and whatever in being a practitioner, and how does that serve you as a judge?
Well, Senator, I believe that it's given me the skills to review the record closely, whether it's a record I've created, a record that's coming from the other side, and pay attention to that, to listen and understand both sides. And I think, as I'd explained to Chair Durbin, both jobs require setting aside any personal or political views I have to as an advocate, make the best argument I can, and as a judge to reach the best result I can and communicate it clearly so that I could be the kind of judge, if confirmed, that I would want to appear in front of as an advocate.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Professor Johnstone, thanks for being here today. Congratulations to you and your family. As I mentioned earlier, there may be written questions coming your way by October the 19th, and I hope you'll reply as promptly as possible for that eventuality. Thanks again for joining us very much today.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. Thanks to the committee.
We're now going to move to our second panel, and it takes a minute or two for the staff to set things up, so we'll stand in brief recess until that moment arrives. It should be very soon. Thank you. Raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that all of the nominees have answered in the affirmative, which is a good thing. And we'll start with Judge Calabretta. You have 5 minutes or so to introduce your family and say a few words. Please take it away.
All right, thank you. Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the committee. I would first like to thank Senator Feinstein for recommending my nomination, and to Senator Padilla for his support, and Chair Durbin for your warm introduction. I'd also like to thank President Biden for nominating me to be a U.S. District Court judge, which is the honor of my lifetime. None of my accomplishments would be possible without my mother, Kathleen, who is here with me today. She worked 2 jobs throughout my childhood and made numerous sacrifices so that I could live up to the potential she saw in me. I'm incredibly fortunate that along the way, she met the man I know as my father, Charles, who is here supporting me as he has consistently done since I was 14. I'd also like to acknowledge my former supervisor and friend, Tamar, who made the long trip to from California to support me today, and other friends who are here in the audience. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to my husband, Jonathan, who, as in everything, is by my side today. Jonathan is a constant source of support and reassurance, and he is the glue that holds our family together. Our 2 very rambunctious boys, Parker and Declan, aren't quite old enough to join us today, but someday when they watch these proceedings, I want them to know how proud I am of them and that they bring me and Jonathan more joy than we ever thought possible. I'd like to acknowledge my and Jonathan's brothers and sisters and their spouses who are watching from home, as well as Jonathan's parents, Tom and Kathy, who have treated me as a part of their family since I met them over 10 years ago. I'd also like to thank my colleagues on the Sacramento Superior Court bench who have taught me so much about what it means to be a judge. And with that, I welcome the committee's questions.
Thank you, Judge. And now, Mr. Garcia.
Good morning.
Morning.
I want to begin by thanking you, Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, for convening this hearing today. And I want to say just, what a true honor it is to appear before you and this committee to discuss my nomination. I'm so appreciative of the warm and kind words from the senators from the great state of New Mexico, Senator Martin Heinrich and Senator Ben Ray Lujan, and I can't thank them enough for their support of my candidacy. Let me also just say how truly grateful I am to President Biden for the honor of this nomination and bestowing on me what is truly the highest honor of my professional career. With me today and sitting behind me is my mom, my partner, and her daughter, who I consider to be my own. They have served as my champions and biggest cheerleaders during this process. In addition to those present, I have a host of relatives, friends, and colleagues from various states watching these proceedings online. I've received a ton of text messages this morning and emails, and I'm grateful for their support. Finally, let me just say what a privilege it is to be sitting on this panel with this particular group of nominees. I've come to know them over the past few weeks, and I'm inspired by all of their professional achievements and their commitment to justice. And so with those prefatory remarks out of the way, again, Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, let me just reiterate how honored I am to be before you today, and I look forward to answering any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Judge Hopkins.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee for this opportunity. Importantly, I want to thank President Biden for this nomination and my home state Senators Brown and Portman for their support and those kind words of introduction. I want to thank my chamber staff, past and present, for their hard work and dedication for assisting me in the administration of justice. My sisters, Cynthia and Patricia, and Dad, Eddie, have journeyed here from the Football Hall of Fame capital, Canton, Ohio, and Newton, Georgia, where I was born and lived the first 5 years of my life. There are no words to express my heartfelt appreciation for all they have sacrificed personally to support me through my many years of schooling. My daughter, Haley, an attorney with a network TV and streaming service in New York, and my son, Jeffrey Arthur, a marketing professional with a Major League Baseball team in Chicago, are my inspiration. My wife, Michelle, has been a wonderful mother and a supporter for the past 3 decades. I love you all very much. To my amazing bankruptcy court colleagues from around the country, especially those in the Southern District of Ohio, you are the best. Thanks also to my extended family and to my special friend, Jim Thomas, who flew out from Columbus to be here today. I am forever indebted to Senior Circuit Judge Alan Norris of the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, who offered me a clerkship out of law school. Among the other valuable lessons taught, Judge Norris instilled in me a profound respect for the third branch and its important role in our democracy. Finally, I would be truly remiss if I did not mention my late mother, Minnie L. Hopkins, whose dream it was, as she read by candlelight beneath her bed, shared with her siblings, the sons and daughters of sharecroppers in Southwest Georgia, to one day become a school teacher and to see her children and grandchildren have the opportunity to go as far as their God-given talents would take them, free from the poverty and segregation she experienced as a child and young adult. I sit before the committee as the hope and the dream of my late mother, a beloved teacher and elementary school principal of the Canton City Public Schools for 30 years. I am sure she smiles down on this day knowing that her dream has been fulfilled. Mr. Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, thank you again for this opportunity. I welcome your questions.
Thanks, Judge. Ms. Jenkins?
Thank you, Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and the entire committee for convening this hearing and considering my nomination. I am especially grateful to you, Senator Durbin, for the kind and generous introduction, and along with Senator Duckworth for recommending me to the President. I'd like to thank President Biden for the honor of this nomination. I am grateful for the opportunity to return to public service if I am confirmed. Some of my family is with me today. Rick, Sharon, Courtney, Afia, thank you for the love and support that you have shown me. I also wish to acknowledge my late father, Frank, and my late father-in-law, Richard. Both men grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and both achieved incredible success over the course of their lives despite the odds. I feel their support for me in this room today. My parents instilled the value of hard work into my sister and me. The sacrifices of my parents and my parents-in-law are the reason that Rick and I were able to chase our dreams with a move to Chicago some 16 years ago. I have a host of family and friends watching from Chicago and Ohio, including my son, who is in school today. Thank you to my incredibly supportive colleagues at Cooley, my former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Ohio, the Northern District of Illinois, the entire Northern District of Illinois courthouse family, as well as my former colleagues at Jones Day. Each of these experiences allowed me to learn from some of the finest lawyers and professionals this country has to offer. Finally, I must extend a special thank you to Judge Solomon Oliver Jr. from the Northern District of Ohio, for whom I clerked. He taught me what it means to be a lawyer, and he modeled what an excellent judge must do. Listen carefully, remain open-minded, and treat every litigant with dignity and respect. I hope to emulate those qualities should I be confirmed, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Judge Nelson?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to thank you, Chair Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, for convening this hearing today. I recognize that it is a privilege for me to be here. I'm grateful for you and all of the senators who will be considering my nomination. I wish to publicly thank President Biden for nominating me to the United States District Court for the District of Oregon. I am truly humbled by this high honor and President Biden's faith in me. I'd also like to thank my home state senior senator, Ron Wyden, for his remarks today, his faith and trust in me, and his support. I'd also like to thank our junior senator, Jeff Merkley, for submitting his remarks to the record, and also for his faith and trust and support of me. With me today, I have my husband, Ted, my daughter, Taylor, my mother, Jacqueline, my brother, Anthony, and my friends, Alice and Sonia. My mother, Jacqueline, instilled in my brother the values of excellence, humility, and hard work. But I'd like to say to all of those that are here with me today, each of you are the best of me, and I would not be here without your unwavering love and support. I'm grateful for each of you, and I love you very much. I'd also like to recognize the host of people who couldn't be here with me today, but who are watching on the live stream. My niece Cameron, who is watching before and going to her college classes today, family members and friends from across the country, my court families, both at the Multnomah County Circuit Court and the Oregon Supreme Court, and the many colleagues and community members who have supported me and wished me well throughout the years. I acknowledge the spirits of my late father, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and dear friends who are no longer with us here on earth, but who are always with me, and I feel their presence in the room today. I hope to make everyone proud. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Justice Nelson. It's been my experience, having served on this committee for quite some time, and now chair, and my personal experience as a practicing lawyer in Springfield, Illinois, before being elected to Congress, that federal judges have a different temperament. Some of them with a title and a black robe and a lifetime appointment bring out the best in them. They are just extraordinary, and I can think of many in my background. Others, not so much. I think the question of demeanor of a judge in a courtroom is not often talked about because it is so subjective. But each of you have either presided as a judge or been in a courtroom, and I'd like your thoughts on perhaps a lifetime experience, personal experience with a judge that gave you some insight into how a judge can be just and fair and basically make people feel welcome in a courtroom, and perhaps the opposite as well. Judge Calabretta, would you like to start?
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I was fortunate to see up close Judge William Fletcher and, of course, Justice John Paul Stevens. From both of them, I took a great respect for the law. Justice Stevens, in particular, really brought a sense of humility to the bench, and that's something that I value. I've had the opportunity to be a judge for the last almost 4 years, and I can see how important the cases are to the litigants in front of me. And so I strive each and every day to make sure that they feel heard, that they feel respected, and that they feel like someone has listened to them and given them a fair and impartial decision. And that's what I would do as a judge if I were so fortunate to be confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. When I first began my law career, I had the good fortune of working for an attorney named Charlie Daniels, who later became Chief Justice of the New Mexico Supreme Court. And I remember him telling me one time that a lawsuit is not to be used to embarrass litigants or attorneys. And I really took that to heart. During the course of the litigation, I didn't add parties that didn't need to be added, and I felt he acted that way during his tenure as a Supreme Court justice. He was kind to everybody who appeared before him. He didn't embarrass anybody, even if they maybe didn't present the correct legal arguments or cite the right case. And I've tried to emulate that during the course of my professional career.
Judge Hopkins?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. I had the good fortune of working for Judge Norris, and he instilled in me that it was most important to respect the institution of the court. The court will be here. It is our good fortune to be part of it and to be good stewards of it while we are here to take very good care of it. The other thing he instilled was it is so vital that we have our decisions issued timely so that the parties aren't waiting and that they have substantial justice in a very short period of time.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. I have had the good fortune of practicing before virtually every judge in the Northern District of Illinois as a litigant for nearly 15 years. That particular district is full of very smart, thoughtful, demanding judges who require the very best of the litigants who appear before them. And as a result of that experience, I was always able to rise to the challenge by digging in with a lot of hard work and working very hard at all times to meet the expectations not only of the judges before whom I appeared, but also on behalf of, in my role as an advocate, the United States. And so I've been privileged to serve in that role, and I learned tremendously from the individuals who I will hope to one day call colleagues should I be confirmed.
Thanks, Justice Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I've had the good fortune to work with a number of wonderful judges and currently sitting with justices that really epitomize taking their role very seriously in making sure that everyone has a full and fair opportunity to be heard. But two people come to mind for me. The first, the late Justice Betty Roberts, who was a trailblazer in her own right, who told me that you always treat everyone, not only before you, but the staff, extremely well, because that is important to the administration of justice. And the other person is a retired judge who was my colleague on the Multnomah County Circuit Court, Janice Wilson. She was a person who was living with disabilities, and so she knew how it was feel to be not treated as a human. And she instilled in me that you always took the time to treat everyone well so that they feel like they had an opportunity to be heard. And those are the people that mean a lot to me as I sit on the bench.
So there's a concern, obviously, of bias by a judge. That's understandable. And in this committee, it often displays itself as people look at the background of an individual and say, that judge or that nominee is a former prosecutor for many, many years. Ms. Jenkins, 14, 15 years as a prosecutor. Or Justice Nelson, wait a minute, take a look at that. She was a public defender for many years. Do they come to these cases with a bias? Could they come to a conclusion which is proper by law and do it in a manner that is credible? Tell me about your background, Justice Nelson, and whether that has influenced your decision-making on the bench.
Chair Durbin, in the 16 years that I have served as a state trial court judge and appellate judge, I have sat on over 300 trials, thousands of matters, and hundreds of oral arguments. In each matter, I understand that they're very important. And I approach each case with an open mind and treat everyone fairly and impartially, because to the litigants, their case is the most important case in the world to them. I try to communicate all decisions clearly so that they can be understood. And if I'm so fortunate to be confirmed, I would continue to do that.
Ms. Jenkins, take a look at your background. Clearly an accomplished prosecutor who was given additional responsibilities in the U.S. Attorney's Office to head up the criminal division. Now, we have others who come before us who've spent their whole lives as public defenders. I have some of my colleagues on this panel who will never vote for them to become a judge because of that. They're just assuming there's a prejudice there. Tell us your thoughts on being a judge and whether there's a special sensitivity to charges of bias because of your background.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. I recognize the issues that you just laid out, and I would do my level best every day to put aside any role that I previously had as an advocate and focus only on application of the law to the facts in the case presented before me in order to reach the appropriate determination according to precedent. I would be very cognizant and aware of the fact that my previous experience as a prosecutor could creep in, but I would do everything possible to prevent that. In fact, my time in private practice in the last year or so has given me a fresh opportunity to work as a defense attorney in the private sector, which has given me fresh perspective. And so I appreciate the opportunity to become, if confirmed, a neutral arbiter.
Thank you. Judge Hopkins, when I came to this committee 20 plus years ago, I was assigned to a subcommittee that was chaired by Chuck Grassley. The Republicans were in the majority in the committee, and we had the administrative subcommittee, which had a variety of issues and subjects of jurisdiction. Turned out the number one issue was reforming the bankruptcy code. This goes back a few years, and you probably remember it better than most.
1978.
Yes. And we had our differences, but I certainly developed a friendship and respect for Senator Grassley as we tackled that issue. It turned out that I had more experience with bankruptcy law than any member of the Judiciary Committee by virtue of taking a bankruptcy law course at Georgetown and by being appointed trustee for a gas station in Springfield, Illinois, when it went into bankruptcy. So I had that wealth of experience to lean on as we rewrote the bankruptcy code. You've spent 25 years in the practice, really focusing on the bankruptcy code. Would you like to say a word or two about that before I ask the next question?
Certainly. Thank you, Senator Durbin. Bankruptcy law is often viewed as a specialty. It is one of the most general practice areas that there still is. Under the Butler decision from the United States Supreme Court, we bring in all of the property law that comes from the states. So we can one day apply Illinois law and another day California law. Very sophisticated practice with a very dedicated bar, and my colleagues who sit on the bench are some of the finest minds in the legal community that there are.
You've anticipated my next question, and that was the impact of that experience as you face the possibility, and a probability, let me add, of becoming a district court judge with a practice, or I should say a responsibility that reaches primarily into the criminal field, but also the civil as well. As you anticipate that venture into criminal law, what are your thoughts?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I have been a bankruptcy judge for 26 years. We apply the federal rules of civil procedure, the rules of evidence, all of those tools I'll take with me as I go into the district court if I'm so fortunate to be confirmed by this body. The criminal practice will test me in the sense that I'll have to reach into my recesses of my skill sets that I've developed over the years to become more familiar with the criminal rules and the law, the substantive law on sentencing under 3553. I am confident in my ability to be able to do that, though.
I have no doubt that you can rise to that challenge. Mr. Garcia, when I listened to my colleagues, Senators Heinrich and Lujan, talk about your background, it's incredible where you have been and what you have done. I hate to pick out one case and ask you to comment on it, but I think it's a topical case, which if we had the full complement in this committee, they'd be asking about as well. In your capacity as general counsel to New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is a friend, you helped draft public health directives related to COVID-19 pandemic and defended the state and challenge in some of these orders. You represented New Mexico in Legacy Church versus Kunkel, in which a New Mexico church challenged in April 2020 order prohibiting mass gatherings without social distancing. Could you tell us more about that case and what the outcome was?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Durbin, and I'm sure the governor appreciates your kind words. She always has very nice things to say about you, too. In my capacity as general counsel, I represented the state and defended the state on numerous challenges to the various restrictions that the Department of Health, our State Department of Health, and the governor implemented in response to the COVID pandemic. The Legacy Church case was early on in the pandemic and dealt with occupancy restrictions at the church. The case, we relied largely on Chief Justice Roberts' concurring opinion in South Bay United, as I think many people did during the nascent stages of the pandemic. That decision was ultimately, the district court found in the state's favor, and the 10th Circuit affirmed that decision. Of course, it was prior to the Supreme Court's holding in the Archdiocese case and Tandon, so we didn't have the benefit of the court's opinion in those cases when we litigated the Legacy Church case.
And basically now, if asked to rule on a case involving that, what would guide your ruling?
Certainly those two decisions, Chair Durbin, they have, I think, established a pretty clear framework about analyzing those kinds of issues. I'm hopeful that we never have to analyze those kinds of issues again and deal with the pandemic, but if faced with that, I would certainly rely and follow faithfully all Supreme Court's precedent and 10th Circuit Court precedent.
Thank you for that. Judge Calabretta, I can't miss the opportunity to ask you about Justice John Paul Stevens, a man I knew casually and respected greatly, and I wondered what impact he had on your life.
Thank you, Senator. I have just tremendous respect for Justice Stevens. I don't think I've ever met someone as humble and kind, but who knew the law better than anyone, and I'm certainly biased in saying that. He had a really great respect for the facts of each case, which I found somewhat surprising as a Supreme Court justice. But he could tell you the facts of a case that had been decided 20 years ago. And he really imparted to me the importance of understanding the facts, really digging in deeply to the law. And that's something that I have tried to do throughout my career, and including as a judge.
So we didn't always agree, at least I didn't agree with all of his opinions, but I certainly respected him for the reasons that you mentioned. There was one case in particular, I wondered if you were clerking at the time on the flag burning case?
No, Senator, that was before my time.
Was there any reference to it while you were clerking?
Certainly I think he talked about it. He felt very strongly, as he did in all his decisions, that he had gotten it right. But I know that he had a deep sense of patriotism from his time in military service, which I have no doubt influenced his thinking on that case.
I also respected his personal history with baseball in Chicago, which I won't go into at this point. And someone was very careful to note that a member of the family worked for a Chicago baseball club, but they didn't mention it. Thank you for that, because it would automatically evoke a reaction from the other team and their fans for that regard. So as you probably heard before, there'll be an opportunity for members to send written questions based on what we went through this morning and their own inquiries, and we hope that they'll send them all by October 19th, and you'll respond as quickly as possible. I thank your families and friends for joining us this morning. I will just tell you in general terms, I've asked my staff when it is possible, note the word possible, that your nominations would reach the calendar on the floor, and I believe that's the first part of December. There is a elaborate judicial, I shouldn't say elaborate procedural process here in terms of bringing members before the committee, waiting another week, and then considering them. So I wish you all well. I thank you for being here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and your families, and wish you the best in your pursuit of this nomination. At this point, the Senate Judiciary Committee will stand adjourned.